At least that's the national government. And 1 year later, despite what the Prime Minister said would be a short military intervention, the war is definitely getting closer home in Addis Ababa, according to reports. State of emergency in the country. But how exactly did this start? Let's interrogate these particular stories before we delve deeper into the discussion with our well-able panel, of which we have a foreign relations and defense expert who might shed more light into the nitty-gritty details as Ethiopia is on the brink of precipice. Now, on November 4th, 2020, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered a military offensive against regional forces in Tigray after an army base was seized by rebels. He then vowed the fighting would be over in weeks. A year on, and the conflict has not only escalated, but it has spread across several regions. Ethiopia has now declared a nationwide state of emergency and asked citizens to pick up arms to defend Addis Ababa as rebel forces press south towards the capital. Now, BBC Africa's Ashley Lime explains why exactly Ethiopia is still at war with itself.
What Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed predicted a year ago would be a short-lived military offensive against rebels in Tigray not only continues but has escalated. Here are 3 reasons why. Fighting between the Ethiopian military and rebel forces has now reached the Afar and Amhara regions. The Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, has reportedly joined the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, in their fight against the Ethiopian military for their self-determination. The group is also accused of atrocities against members of the Amhara community, which they deny. The OLA, based in the Oromia region, were enemies of the TPLF, while the Tigrayan group held power for 30 years, but now they are allied and both groups have been branded terrorists by PM Abiy Ahmed, making negotiation difficult. The Amhara Regional Force is another actor, fighting alongside national forces as they claim that Tigray rebels annexed land which has historically been part of the Amhara region. Their forces have occupied some of these areas, which the TPLF also claim has angered many Tigrayans, including some former officials appointed by the Ethiopian PM. The TPLF allied Tigray forces have said they will not stop fighting until the Amhara forces have withdrawn from these areas. With these many different groups involved, all of whom have different aims and different historical rivalries, brokering a lasting peace will be very difficult. According to the UN, more than 5 million people are facing a food crisis in Tigray. They also state that humanitarian aid to the region has been blocked by the forces of the Ethiopian government. The Ethiopian government claims this is a security measure as the aid convoys are, according to the government, attempting to bring weapons into Tigray for the TPLF, something the aid agencies deny. The US has accused the TPLF of raiding warehouses in Amhara and disrupting the transportation of aid. Hundreds of trucks, which carried aid in Tigray, have never returned, worsening the situation. On top of the aid blockade, essential services including communication, power and banking remain cut in Tigray and certain parts of Amhara and Afar. Tigray leaders have continuously insisted they would not stop the fighting until those services are back and the blockade is lifted. The Ethiopian government has decreed the TPLF and OLA terrorist organizations, meaning they won't negotiate with them and making a new ceasefire very difficult. Federal forces declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrew from Mekelle in late June, but it wasn't enough. The TPLF say they are the legitimate leaders of the Tigray region following a unilateral regional election held in September 2020, an election not recognized by the Ethiopian government. Many of the TPLF leaders have been arrested and the Tigrayan group wants self-government and recognition before they come to the negotiating table. PM Abiy Ahmed has so far rejected any calls for talks, and since the TPLF last put out their preconditions for negotiations, they have made significant military advances. As long as they are on the front foot militarily, the TPLF might have less motivation to make peace. In fact, Tigray leaders have recently said any possibility for peace is too little, too late, dashing any hopes to a quick end to the bloodshed. The situation seems to be getting worse by the day. Ethiopia has now declared a national state of emergency as Tigrayan rebels are pressing south towards Addis Ababa. Rather than finding a compromise and moving towards a peaceful settlement, the situation is escalating and looking bleak. Both regional and international agencies are faced with the task of coming up with mechanisms of diffusing the conflict. But as it is, there is no definite end in sight to the war.
Well, ethnic groups are definitely playing a part in fueling the crisis. But get this, conflict between the federal government and the rebel TPLF forces in Ethiopia threatens the very fabric of the state, with hundreds of thousands of people on the brink of starvation. But while the focus has been on the conflict in Tigray, right across Ethiopia, different groups are involved in their own struggles. Foremost among them are the Oromo, Ethiopia's largest ethnic group. Now, 2 months ago, the Oromo Liberation Army announced a formal alliance with the Tigrayan rebels in the northern part of the country against the government in Addis Ababa. On Monday, Ola Commander Jal Maro told the BBC the group had taken several towns in western, central and southern Oromia, facing little resistance from government forces who were retreating. Now, government spokespeople have not responded to the BBC's request for comment. Now, in this exclusive report, BBC Africa's correspondent Catherine Biaruhanga is the first international journalist to be given access to this secretive armed group. Take a look.
Deep in the deserts that straddle Ethiopia and Kenya, hundreds of fighters are preparing for a hidden war. These are men and women of the Oromo Liberation Army. The OLA says its people, the Oromo, have been oppressed for more than a century. This is an old armed struggle, but many of the people here that you can see were not born when the Oromo Liberation Army was first formed in the 1970s. Today, as Ethiopia faces many conflicts and challenges, this group sees new opportunities.
Also, wareegama guddaan hin bahin akkaatuma itti yaane guutuma guututti Oromiyaa itti dhuunfannu keessatti hojjetaa jirra, kanas itti milkaa jirra, Finfinneenis marfama keenya keessa jirti.
We cannot independently verify the OLA's claims, but if true, they would have been unthinkable just 12 months ago. Ethiopia's new government is under immense pressure. In the north, Tigrayan rebels are fighting government forces and their allies. In recent months, this war has spread to the neighboring regions, while elsewhere, ethnic conflicts are simmering. And in Oromia, violent protests have rocked parts of the region. And the OLA has waged its guerrilla war for the right to choose independence. The government's response has been tough. In this video shared on social media, 2 young men are marched into the bush, allegedly by the police. Human rights groups have accused authorities of indiscriminate killings and mass arrests. The government told the BBC it does not target civilians. In neighboring Kenya, we find families who fled their homes. Even here in Kenya, you can still see the consequences of the conflict that's happening just across the border over there in Ethiopia. These families came here because they say government forces threatened them. They've been here for about 4 months now, and they say they're struggling to find basic things like food, water, and crucially, medicine as well. We've just been told that a 7-year-old died here a week ago because the family couldn't find help. We join the OLA in the desert, where their young recruits are learning to live and fight. A lot of young people here are disaffected with the government, and with so many politicians and opposition leaders currently in detention, a lot of them are seeing this as the solution.
Sila akka nam tokko jiraachuulleen barbaada barachuulleen barbaada firii ta'ee jiraachuulleen barbaada garuu yoo firii ta'ee yookaan baradhee sabii hankee jiruu fi uummati Oromoo guutuun hacuucaaf saamichaaf ajjeecha jal jiru yookaan garbummaa bashaa jal jiru yoo taate wanni ani nyaadhee dhuguuf barnootillee natti mijaa'aa waan taateef.
But the OLA has also been accused of atrocities. These images were given to us by Amhara activists. They claim they show the gruesome aftermath of an OLA massacre.
The Oromo Liberation Army wants to ethnically cleanse the non-Oromos, especially Amharas, from the Oromia region, depose Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and establish an Oromia state under their leadership.
The rebels have denied killing civilians and say they would welcome independent investigations. As the day draws to a close, the sounds of whistles and gunfire are replaced with traditional songs about Oromia. Ethiopia is an increasingly fractured nation. All groups involved in its countless conflicts stand accused of gross human rights violations. All deny they're the ones to blame. But what's certain is that it's ordinary people who are suffering, and that seems unlikely to end anytime soon.
Well, unfortunate scenes from Ethiopia right there, but all to make you understand what exactly is happening in terms of their ethnic attacks on individuals, even as the TPLF and ORA groups push closer to the capital. But still on the same note, President Uhuru Kenyatta on Wednesday weighed in on the Ethiopia crisis and said only dialogue will end the Ethiopian conflict, urging Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and TPLF fighters to seek a political solution to the war, saying the war must stop. President Kenyatta, in a seemingly passionate statement released to the newsrooms, said he has used his good offices as Kenya's president, Ethiopia's friend and neighbor, as well as the head of various international and regional organizations to no avail. Just yesterday, the first year anniversary was marked since the Tigray conflict started, with President Kenyatta saying the crisis has escalated into a nationwide social convulsion of historical proportions for Ethiopia. The Addis Ababa administration this week urged residents of the city that hosts the African Union headquarters and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to arm and protect themselves. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We just had to break down for our viewers what exactly is happening within the Ethiopian country. So much misinformation might be coming through social media, but those are the facts of the matter. And it's interesting, Prof. Midamba, I'd like to start with you. Being a foreign relations and defense expert, well, what exactly is going on? Because just recently, we saw the Prime Minister awarded the Nobel Peace Prize because of bringing together Ethiopia and Eritrea. And then now recently, they seem to have taken a less reconciliatory stance. And he's gone back. He was an army officer, of course, and he's gone back perhaps to the tactics used by previous governments since the issues, the long simmering tensions during the days of authoritarian rule seem to begun to spill over. So where exactly did this begin, and are we looking at an issue that might boil over into the neighboring countries, including Kenya?
Thank you. For our Kenya audience and beyond, there are four major issues that you need to be paying attention to as we talk this morning, and the newspapers and all other information you get. Number one is, why did Ethiopia Prime Minister begin an offensive in Tigray? Secondly, who are the TPLA and the Tigrayans? You need to understand both. Third, is this conflict affecting Ethiopia and its neighbor? To what extent? And thirdly, and lastly, how has the war changed Mr. Prime Minister Abiy profile as a continuous leader? that will bring Ethiopia together. Now, let me quickly, because we have got a few clips of the historical and the current affairs of what's going on that you have issued. Let me begin with what is the implication for Kenya and the rest of the region. Ethiopia is the second largest population in the continent of Africa. And if Ethiopia, as we are looking at it right now, begin to divide, then we are going to have a really serious regional stability never been seen since the Second World War. It has one of the largest military establishments in Africa. Ethiopia has a gun culture, which potentially create groups within groups fighting each other and spillage into Sudan, into Kenya, into other African area is real serious. Ethiopia headquarters is in Addis, and for historical reason. And we need to be sure that the headquarters and the UN establishment in Addis are going to be safe. Ethiopia forces are actively engaged in stabilizing Somalia next door together with Kenya. Mm-hmm. Ethiopia is under, right now, Ethiopia Airline is the safest and the most economically managed airline in Africa. And recently, lastly, Kenya Safaricom signed a big deal with the Ethiopian that will create job opportunity for those, for both Ethiopians and Kenya young men and women. Okay. All these things have a potential to affect Kenya very seriously. Lastly, we are looking at a massive number of refugees into their thousands and maybe in millions coming into Kenya or going to other countries in this area that will severely impact us. So Ethiopia is a very vital, very important country for all of us, and for historical reason, Ethiopia was the only country in Africa that was never colonized. And then later on, as you understand, and my friend Kagwanja can talk about this a lot.
All right.
Ethiopia regime, which was monarch or run by monarch for years, deny ordinary Ethiopia the livelihood that Kenyans and the rest of the African enjoy. And so you have peasant and peasant, and you have the regime. And this current situation is going to end up in a situation where the ethnic group, the Oromo, the Tigray, everybody arm in order to protect their best interests.
Okay, well noted, Prof, and thank you for breaking it down for us. Professor Kagwanja, over to you, and I know you were extensively involved in the team of experts that provided technical backing and intense policy processes that led to the creation of the AU. We well know of how the AU has sort of seemingly remained ineffective, particularly in promoting peace, security, and stability within the region, not just Ethiopia. But now that focus is on the Ethiopian conflict, what's your take as a person who is actively engaged in the formation of the AU and its peace and security architecture, and the net effect that the AU can have in stopping the war in the Tigray region and Ethiopia at large?
Thank you. I should add to your list of things about me that I was in the team that drafted Kenya's foreign policy, which we are now following. Therefore, I'm aware of what Kenya is doing and should be doing. Now, let me go back to Ethiopia. First, the situation in Ethiopia is very disturbing in the sense that there was a lot of optimism when Prime Minister Abiy came to power, and people were beginning to see like he's the one who is going to dismantle the legacy of monarchy and authoritarianism that had bedeviled the country for many years, the one that Professor Midaba is talking about. But that optimism took just months, and it started to dissipate, dry out like morning dew. It is in that confusion that the Norwegian Nobel Committee made its gravest mistake that is going to pay for years. That it confused what you can call a peace deal with a military pact. Because Abiy moving from Addis Ababa to Asmara to shake the hands of Isaias Afewerki was not motivated by the need for regional peace. It was motivated by the need to make a military alliance between two groups that have a common enemy. And the common enemy was the Tigrayan Liberation Front that had dominated Ethiopian politics since 1991. Under Meles Zenawi, and later on under Haile Mariam. Now, why this background is important is that the world finds itself in a very embarrassing situation to deal with a person they tried to build as the hero, the savior, and messiah of Ethiopia. So when war broke out last year in November, the world was shell-shocked. It was shell-shocked because it did not know why this Nobel holder should wage war against his own people, the Tigrayans. He did not wage war against Sudan, against Ethiopia, Egypt, against Kenya. He waged war against his own people. But in the process, because two-thirds of the Ethiopian army was based in Mekere, which is the capital of Tigray, by sending drones and others to destroy everything, Ethiopia in the process destroyed its whole army. That's why it cannot defend its capital. It has no army now. Most of the Air Force experts were from Tigray region and other neighboring regions. Ethiopia now has no military. That's why Abiy is now calling on civilians to arm themselves and fight. Where is the army? It has completely evaporated like the morning dew.
Okay.
What's the future? I think Abiy will have to swallow this pride and accept that what works is when people talk. Now, he'll have to convene a national convention. For what reason? First, to end the war in Tigray and in Oromia and other parts of the country. People are talking about Oromia and Tigray as the only part. Every part of Ethiopia is at war with Ethiopia. So the concept of Ethiopia has never been so rare, declined as it has done today.
Okay.
So what they need is a convention to hammer a new social contract that is going to replace what they have had as a monarchy, a Marxist regime, and later on an insurgent regime by the Tigrayans, and now come up with a more democratic order. And that social contract is the one that is going to produce the new Ethiopian and the new Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is so important to the region, it's so important to Kenya that we cannot stand by and watch. Action needs to be taken. The African Union has been quiet, very shockingly quiet. It needs to rise up and talk.
Okay.
It needs to give direction as to where Ethiopia needs to go.
And indeed, we'll definitely be monitoring